Okay, how do we go? We get our database created, our tables created. I hope so. If not, please let me know in the comments so that I can go back and make it easier for you. So what we're going to do now in this video is we're going to address a couple of the mistakes that I deliberately left in the previous video. And it's mainly around the identity field. So we could have had it in the previous video, but I really wanted to have its own this have its own video, okay? Because it's so vitally important. So what is an identity field? We kind of touched on it before. If we look at our spreadsheet that we had before, we added, sorry, I'll just move myself out the way. Okay, so we added, if you remember, an identity field against each of our customers and against each of our addresses. All right. Now, I think if you remember, if you go back to the first video, originally we had 11 rows here because Eucalyptus Drive was there twice. Okay, there was identity 5 and identity 6. Okay, so one of the things about an identity field is it needs to be, by definition, unique. So let's just assume that we still had 2 records for 15 Eucalyptus Drive. That would be okay like that, where it's got an ID of 11, but you can't have it like that. Okay, that doesn't make sense. You can't have two rows with the same identity. So let's look at now our database, and we're going to come in here to our customers, edit top 200 rows, and we're going to come in here and we're going to put Kate Jones. Okay, and we're just going to again make 200101 in the create TS. Now, if we come over here, first of all, what we're going to do is I'm just going to change rows. Okay, now if we come up here, this little green thing, run, just executes and kind of just refreshes it. What you notice here is, first of all, there's a customer ID of null. Now, null again could have its own separate video, but null does not mean 0. It does not mean blank. The best way to think of null is unknown, or it's something that you just can't verify. And when we do a selects in a couple of videos, it'll make a bit more sense. But the best definition, or the best way to understand a null, and it may not technically be correct, but it's the way to understand it, is that a null is like having a box. And you know there's not nothing in the box, but it's not something that you know. You don't know what it is. It's something in the box that you don't know what it is. It's unknown. And that's kind of what null is. It could be something in the field. It could be empty. You don't know. It's null. Okay? So you can't say equals null. And again, that's for the scripts later on. We're going to talk about that. So what's going to happen here, in an identity field, you cannot have a null value. So that's one of the things we're going to fix. Okay. The other thing is here, if I put it on a 1, that works. Okay. And it works because of the way we set the table up. So an identity, as I said before, by definition, cannot be duplicated. It has to be unique. So this, what we've got here, we may have called it customer ID, but it could be called customer number, customer reference, customer ABCD. Okay. It's not technically an identity field just because I called it customer ID. All right. So we're going to close that, come back here. I'm going to drop these tables. I'm going to come back up here to customers, and after the int, I'm going to write the word identity, if I can spell it. Okay, I'm going to go 1, 1, close bracket like that. So what that's saying is, create this table customers, customer ID, type integer, and it has to be and it's going to be an identity. And the 1, 1 means we're going to start with an integer of 1, and we're going to increment by numbers of 1. Now, if you want, you can make it minus that, and it'll start at minus 15,555 and increment 1. And that's a way if you want to double the size of the table. But in reality, in the real world, if you had a table that needed more than the largest number of an integer, you can just go big int And there's a really good video with a guy called Adam Mechanic, who's a SQL Server guru, very phenomenal guy. He has a very good video on that a big int, you'll never hit the max of a big int, okay? So for our intents and purposes, we're going to leave that at int, leave that at 1. So that the first row will have a row of 1 as the int identity. The next one will be 1 plus 1, and then 2 plus 1, 3 plus 1, and so forth. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that here across all of our identity fields. All right. Now, if I run this script again, we've got use demo 1 at the top, which is important. Press F5. That's now recreated our database. When I come back in here and I go top 200 rows, because it's now an identity field, you notice I can't overwrite that. It's now predefined. Before, when I came in, I could type 1. Now it's an identity field, I can't. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create customer name Fred, caps lock on, Fred Jones. I'm just going to leave that as null for now. And look, it put 1 in for me. Now when I go Bob Smith, it put 2 in for me. Okay, so I cannot overwrite an identity field. So that's super important and something you must do. Now, on the subject of a create TS, let's look at something else we can do while we're here. So again, I'll delete that. In most cases, you would want, or maybe most, a lot of them, when the record's created, you want to keep track of when it was created. So, when was this customer created? You can do it by passing in the value, but what if the developer was lazy, he forgot to pass it in? You'd still want to have some kind of record as to when this record was created. So you can do that at the time of creating the table by having a default value. Okay, so a default value, you can just go default at the end of it here, open bracket, and you can say sys date time. Or if it was a date time offset, okay, and that's really, a date time offset is really handy if you're working across, multi-country, like multi-time zones across different countries. You might want to have a date time offset. So let's go ahead and we'll use a date time offset instead of it's a date time. So therefore, the default would be sys date time offset. All right. So again, I'm going to just drop these tables. I've already dropped it. Recreate. Come back here into customers. Edit them again. So we already said we can't edit the ID. So we're going to come in here and go Fred Smith. Leave that as blank. Change the row. Then I'm going to refresh the data in our viewer. And now, lo and behold, we've got a customer ID that was auto-generated, and we've got the date time offset. So it's currently, time I'm filming this video, 3rd of September at 18:18 Sydney time. So the +10 saying Sydney time. One last thing I'm going to show you before we wrap up this video, again, revolving around default cell values or field values. If I come back into here, so I shouldn't have dropped that just yet. No, wrong one. I'm going to edit top 200. What's going on? Oh, so I dropped it. Sorry. Okay. One more. Okay. So again, we're back in here again. This time, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just maybe going to put in a value here in the date, like that. Oh, our customer's got null. So we don't want an unknown customer name. What can we do to force someone to put in a value in customer name? Okay, well, I'm going to come back in here, drop these again. The last thing I'm going to come in here and go is type in not null. Okay, so we've got a customer ID, which is an identity field. The customer name is compulsory, can't be null, and the create timestamp is going to default to the current sys date time offset. Okay, the UTC time at the time it was created. So again, I'm going to run that. I'm going to come back in here. top 200 rows, leave that blank, put this back with a valid date, bang, error comes up, it can't be committed. That row will not be entered because I did not put a value into the customer name field, okay? So I'm going to OK on that. I'm going to come back in here, type in Fred, done. Also notice too, the customer ID did not go to 1. It went to 2. Why? Because 1 was blown away because I didn't do a valid row. If I do the same thing here, put in invalid data, so I don't fill in a customer name, error. When I do put in a valid name, it's gone to 4. Okay, so that ID kind of was created, but it was blown away because the data wasn't valid. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so I'm going to come back in here. That's how current script looks like. I'm going to ask you to drop the current tables, recreate them with some defaults. And I'll see you back in the next video where we're going to start talking about indexing and having a default index on each table. See you in the next video.